I went uptown to Deerfield and went to the interior decorator store. I go, yeah, I want to wallpaper my apartment because it's an apartment. I don't care. So I had them come in and put up all this nice fancy wallpaper, went out and got some furniture, a glass table, yeah, the whole thing.
Welcome, everybody, to the Warrior Podcast. This is Frank Lardino, your host. I have a very special guest today, Mr. James Place, Jimmy Place. And to give you a little introduction, he was one of the biggest brokers on the trading floor. We're continuing our trading floor series today. He's got some amazing stories, amazing history. And now, please help me welcome Jimmy Place.
Thanks for having me on this. This is an honor.
Awesome. I'm so excited, Jimmy. We've already had conversations about some of your stories.
Yep.
So you wanted to start at the beginning. So let's start at the beginning.
Let me just start off and say, I think this is a great series you're doing, and I think it should be out there. And the first part I watched, you guys were talking about Eurodollars and a few things. I think we should go back a little bit. I'm going to start with my pork belly days and talk about some of the legends and some of the true pioneers that were there that I got to meet early on. And so that's why I wanted to kind of start it off with the pork bellies, and we'll go from there to the S&Ps.
Awesome. And for those of you out there who don't know too much about the trading floor, there's different pits that trade different things, okay? And pork bellies is one of those commodities. It's one of the first ones that was ever created down there, and that's where Jimmy started.
Yeah, they had the bellies, the cattle, the hogs, and the IMM was basically brand new. They had eggs and butter, and it was small, tight, it was great. But
how did you get down there, Jimmy? How did you?
My dad was with Merrill Lynch. He was with Merrill Lynch at the Board of Trade. He was a vice president, and he helped run the trading floors at the board for all the grain pits. And he got transferred to Chicago in 1967 from New York, where he ran the floors. And so we moved out to Deerfield from Brooklyn, New York, and that's what he did. And I never I thought he was a stockbroker or whatever.
Right.
Never heard of an exchange or anything like that. So, but after high school, I started working at Dominic's, and then I said I want to do something different. And I know my older brother Stephen, God bless his soul, had gotten a membership at the Cotton Exchange on the Comex in New York. And so, I would talk to him about that, and he seemed to be doing pretty good. And so I asked my dad, I'd like to get into this. And so he got me a runner's job at the Merc with Merrill Lynch.
And you were running in the meats?
So at that time, the exchange the floor was really small. I forget what was on Monroe or wherever it was.
It was that it looked like a 2-story building, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Riverside.
I was right across from Union Station, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
I got a job as a runner, and I went down there, and I think it was $60 a week. And they just said, the kind of guys knew who my dad was from over there, so they were all very nice. And so they showed me what to do. So back in those days, they had the big machines that the orders came over. They tore it off. And they handed it to you, and they took you around to show you who goes where, what order goes where with it. So, you'd bring it to the pork belly pit, you bring it to the cattle pit, the hog pit, you met the brokers who did your business, and it was pretty simple.
Yeah.
Run that back and come back here.
Yep. I was a runner too. So
yeah. So, back then there were no dupe cards. There were no, it was pretty archaic when I look back on it, how it was. And, as back then it was all paper deck. Mm-hmm. There was no trading card deck like we all transferred to. And they had the deck handlers out there. You would hand it to their deck handler, and they all held the deck and give it to them. And then you just go back to your desk and come and run another one.
Yep.
And the hours were great. I think the bellies were from 9 to 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow. I was on the 1:30 train home already. So, but it was great. So that's where I started and got to know the characters on the floor. And one of the biggest ones that stuck out in my head was Harry the Hat in the Pork Bellies. I bring him orders, and he was this bigger than life, crazy figure. You know, they all talked about Harry the Hat. You know, so and I would love going over there. And at the time, his brother Dickie was the deck handler. We all know Dickie, which is Derby, and but I took a real liking to him. He was always so nice and friendly. But as was a lot of other guys, I loved the cattle. I loved Ed Cahill and his partner Art Parrs. Ed was great, and, you know, his son Mike went on to, you know, be a Eurodollar broker. But Ed was great, and I used to ride the train with him home he got off at somewhere around Morton Grove or Gulf, something like that. But I used to ride the train with these guys.
Nice.
In there in the morning on the way home. Guess what? I got to know them, and my dad always taught me, be very respectful, listen. If you have a question, you know, ask a question. No smart-ass stuff. You know, you're here to learn. And that's what you should do. Just learn and watch and listen.
Nice. I want to backtrack on Harry the Hat. Guys, he was a broker. He was larger than life. You would have to meet him. You would not believe, like, he was just such a character. Funny as hell. His badge was Hat. We all had badges based on that's who you would trade with in the pit. And his badge was Hat. His name was Harry Lawrence, but, you know, we call him Harry the Hat because that was
Harry
his
the
badge.
Hat. Crazy Harry the Hat.
Now tell me, he had the limo. What was the story with the limo?
Yeah, the limo, and his driver was named Otis, because I got to know Otis very well.
Is that burgundy limo, right?
Yeah, it was the burgundy limo. I'm just going to tell a quick funny story, jumping ahead a little bit.
Yeah.
About Otis. I ended up working for Harry. So, and that's how I got my start. But speaking of his limo and Otis, we were having, this is probably, a few years later, when we were having him do something. He had to drop something off in Northbrook, and Otis was the greatest, nicest guy in the world. But Otis sometimes had a hard time taking directions or whatever it might be, especially, and having crazy Harry as your boss. You're driving Harry around in those days, which was no easy feat. But anyway, so we sent him out to Northbrook to do something, and it was down this street called Techney Road. He had to go like to Techney and Finkston Road or whatever. And so he called the trading floor, and I got on the phone. He's like, I don't know where the hell I'm going out here, whatever. I said, where are you at right now? And he goes, I'm lost, and I pulled into this business. It says Affordable Roofing. And I said, Affordable Roofing? I go, you mean affordable roofing? He goes, I don't know what the hell it's called. It looks like it's affordable to me. So, I always remember that story because we were dying. Affordable. But
he used to stand outside. He had the chauffeur suit on. He'd be waiting for Harry.
Thing, he'd be waiting out for Harry every day, drop him off in the morning, and Otis was great. I rode in that limo, for a long time, but.
Did he, now I heard that maybe it was folklore, but he had the limo. Did he lose his license or?
I don't remember that.
Yeah, that was the story that I was told. He lost his license because DUI or something like that.
No, I heard a story back then that, Harry, he also had a Rolls Royce, Harry, and that he rode it up onto the sidewalk somewhere in the city and got arrested for it or something like that.
Yeah.
I just remember a story like that. So, but I don't know about him losing his license.
You started way before me. So when I was a runner, like I was looking at all these guys like, this is way out of my league. This guy's got a limo waiting for him. Some of the other brokers will get to,
right.
They had 7-8 cars, Rolls Royces and Ferraris, and, it was insane. I couldn't believe it.
I was like, wow. My dad never told me much about it. I mean, I got to meet some legends from the Board of Trade before this that I'd go to their house. I'd be like, wow. There was one guy named Gene Cashman. And the Cashman, he was, legendary down on the, in the bean pit. They caught these bean moves and he made, tens of millions of dollars off of it in the early 70s. His brother, Eddie Cashman, and a few others. And my dad was friends with them. But they were like old school, businessmen. You know what I mean? I'd go to their house and, They were just normal, wealthy businessmen.
Yeah.
When you get to the Merc and all of a sudden you got the Harry the Hats of the world, with his velvet purple pants and his silk shirts and his craziness, there was a few of them. He stood way out. I mean, most of the guys still back in the mid 70s were, they had nice shirt and ties, but there was a few crazies starting, in that generation, that came on board.
Okay, so you're running now?
I'm running orders.
And then how do you transition out of that? What was your next thing?
I wanted to work for Harry. I wanted to get in the trading pits. People are, they're telling you, oh, this guy they're making this much money. I'm like, what? What? That guy's a millionaire? Or that guy makes, $500,000 a year? Or wait, he gets paid $2 for every time he fills this, and he's filling this many, and then they're trading their own accounts in the market. So after a while, I talked to my dad about it and stuff. He's like, because my dad never expounded too much on that. He just said, if you were good at this, you could be very successful. But then as I got to know people on the floor, and before we go on, I just want to say that it was such a pleasure to meet like Mr. Mulcrone, the Pat and all the other Mulcrones, their father, the Lanfear's father,
I heard these guys were like legends.
They were it. They were the old school guys that had been there since the 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever it was. I think Mr. Mulcrone might have been a policeman.
Yeah, I think I remember that as well.
But there was like Mike Cahill's dad, Ed Cahill, the Lanfears, Don Lanfear, their dad, a lot of them. And, their sons, came way later, but I got to, see it a little bit beforehand. Because, most of these guys, even though they were my age, maybe were off to college and didn't come on the scene until like the 80s and stuff like that. But, you had your legends back then. You had Barry Lynn, Ted Cole, God bless his soul, just a great man. Mark Milstein, God bless his soul. There was a lot of them I got to be friends with and meet, as I got into the pork bellies and stuff like that, these were real pioneers. You know what I mean? Mm. They set the way for everybody. I got to meet Leo, Mickey Norton, tons of them. Just great people at such a young age. Not that half of them would remember me these days. I don't know. And unfortunately, so many of them are gone. Mm-hmm. But, you're going back 50 years now, 40 to 50 years. Right. It's not like the other day I was talking to somebody. I'm like, yeah, that was great. He goes, Jimmy, that was 40 years ago. I'm like, shit, that's right.
And that's how fast it goes by.
How old is he? 78? I'm like, wow. But anyway, so I started as a runner. And then I was there, I don't know how long, maybe 6-8 months. And, to supplement my money, I was still living at my parents' house. And then, I delivered Chinese food after work or pizza or do whatever, just work around the clock. But I really fell in love with the place. And I said, I want to be one of these guys. So then my dad got transferred back to New York to open up the World Trade Center for Merrill Lynch. Mm. And, my mom said, okay, we're going to move back to New Jersey. I said, no, I want to stay. I was only 18, 19. And I had to figure out how I was going to do it. And I said, I don't want to leave the trading floor. I said, I don't want to leave this place. So anyway, I had heard that, I guess, they had the T-bill pit that started. T-bill, gold pit, in the infancy back then of that. And I think, and Derby, Dickie Lawrence, was leaving Harry, getting his seat to go in one of those pits. So I heard Harry was looking for a deck handler. So I went up to Harry and I said, I'd like to do this. And he said, do you know how to do this? I said, yeah. I said, yeah. I mean, I've researched it. I asked people, I said, how hard could it be? You have a buy side and a sell side. And if
it's freaking hard.
A buy side and a sell side. And, and you put the closest order here, and the further they are away, they go behind that. And you just sort them out. And you hand it to them when it gets close. Yeah, I know how to do it. He goes, okay, you're hired. I said, really? He goes, 2 weeks. He goes, how much you want to make? And I said, I don't know, 250, 300 a week? He goes, all right, I'll give you 300 a week. Went home, I'm like, holy shit. I'm going from 60. I think I might have gotten a raise to $70 as a running, like 300 a week.
Wow.
I'm like, wow, 300 a week. So I was all kind of nervous, and I told the guys at Merrill, and just to buy the guys at Merrill that back in the day, it was so great. The guys that ran the desk at Merrill, one was guy Jerry Schultz, another guy was whatever. They were train conductors. So they ran the desk there. They didn't have badges. The older, they had their executives there, like a guy named Ben Glazer and a few others, Jerry O'Connell, that were friends of my father. So they knew me too. So there was a tiny little bit of an edge I had too. Because they were in charge of where all the business went in the pit. So, as people got to know that, I had a little bit of an edge that way. So
everybody's had some kind of relationship down there. I mean,
that's how it was.
Yeah.
But I can just remember that quick story. There was a guy named Bill Henner, Peg Leg Bill. He was a spreader, I think, in the bellies at the time, and he had his little crew of spreaders. And a lot of people from our generation wouldn't know him, but man, he could be nasty. He'd bring an order in, he'd grab that order out of your hand. Let me see that order. Went home and told my dad. I go, God, what a dick. My dad goes, hey, yeah? What was his name? My dad was a big strapping Irishman, like a cross between John Wayne and Robert Mitchum.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
So, it didn't take too long. A couple of days later, I brought him another order. He goes, how are you doing today? The rumor was my dad ran into him, said, you ever talk to my son like that again, I'm going to throw you out the window. Actually, he was very nice after that. But these guys used to grab your orders, okay, the spreaders and everybody else, and look at them, and then, hand them to the broker. And these were the locals that wanted to be on the other side of it. That's what they would do.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I got my badge. I changed out badges. I had my hat badge. And I remember going my first day going, shit. And all of a sudden you're standing there, and all of a sudden you're there at 8:30 and all the runners are bringing you orders. And you're looking at it, sell a pork belly at $32.60, sell a pork belly at $32.70, blah, 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 blah. And then I got this order. It said, and buy two at $37.60 stop. I'm like,
what's the stop order?
Yeah. I used to deliver them to the pit, but I never asked what it was. I'm like, so I turned to whoever it was, handling one of the decks. I go, what's the stop order? Where does that go? So they said, it goes on if it's a buy stop, it goes on your upside. And if you happen to have a sell at $32.60 and a buy at $32.60 stop, the stop goes first. That means if the market hits that price, you're going to buy one. It becomes a buy one at the market. I said, okay. So I went with it. And I had the deck. And actually, I got very good at it real fast. And I held the deck like Harry Lawrence held the deck. The sell side going this way, the buy side going this way. A lot of people held it and they wrapped it. And they kept track on back. We didn't do it that way.
You had, like, if the market was rallying, you would only have the sell side facing you.
Yes, facing me. And I'd go through that thing and I would, hand them into that, right off the bat.
Did you hold your trading cards like that too, or no?
No.
You had that, you could see the buy side and the sell side. You had them.
I just flip it. I had my buy, when I had later on when we used trading cards as the deck, I had my buy side, I had my sell side. My buy side was here, and then I would have my sell side. I just put it on back and turn it around to the sell, so I just flip it.
So it was the same way, kind of. You were doing it,
yeah, right?
Yes, because I would overlap like that. So I had the buy. I could see the buy side and the sell side simultaneously.
Yeah, I would do that too.
Because a lot of times your bid and offer is
right.
one tick apart, right? You're 3 bidded 4, and
exactly right. Yeah. So,
but man, those paper decks holding those paper decks.
That was crazy. Get this freaking big. They'd get this thick, and you'd be like, "Whoa!" But you got good at it. You know what I mean? And everybody used a pen and a pencil. Harry the Hat used a flare pen, a red flare pen. And how they could read his writing, I'll never know. But I don't even know. I think there were dupes on him back then. I don't think the broker had the dupes. I think the desk had the dupe. But whatever. So I got to know that, and then I got to know all the runners coming from all the houses better, and I had this prestigious job, and then I got to know the guys in the pit better, and the cast of characters that were in the pork belly pit. You know, they came over, hey, welcome aboard. They really didn't know I was. I wasn't running before. We got to know him fast. There was, there was Harry, and then Harry had partners, Jeff Greengoss and Barry Hirsch.
I remember Barry Hirsch. I don't remember Jeff.
Yeah, Jeff Greengoss, one of the greatest guys ever in the world. Loved Jeffrey. You know, Barry was the partner, and, Barry was okay. Now you're there, and let's see, I think Brian Koss, Jimmy Kalenis' deck handler. So I met Jimmy, and, Jimmy in that pit, it was small, and they had the exchange staff desk up higher, how they had them. And Kalenis just, JKL, dressed to the T, different colored glasses, frames, the whole thing. Leaning against it with his deck. And
I saw him my first day as a runner. And, there's no smoking on the trading floor. Yeah, and he was all dappered out. I was a runner for Gerald Commodities. It was a
I remember
company.
that, yeah.
So he's smoking a cigarette with his butt leaning against the desk, and a security guard came over and said, hey, I'm sorry, Jimmy, you can't smoke. And he did one of these. He blew his smoke right in the guy's face.
Doesn't surprise me.
It was like,
doesn't surprise me. We'll get into a couple of stories with him.
Yeah, we'll get to him, but
yeah, so Jim was there, and he just smirked at me.
Yeah.
I was maybe a little cocky Irish kid, but I had never seen the likes of all this before. But, I remember he shook my hand and he goes, good luck to you. How you doing, kid? I'm like, good. And then there was a bunch of the others. I mean, old timers that there were forever. There was Seymour Keeshan. There was Phil Carafotis, who I met. There was a whole bunch of them in there. Billy Colavis, all these old timers that were in there, and then the traders that were in there. It was a very small pit, but I got to know everybody fast, and we had a blast, and I loved my job. I did okay the first week. I remember getting through it, going home on Friday going, I did it. I fooled them. Baptism under fire, baby. And, and I just loved it. The excitement of it. And Harry Lawrence, the first Friday I'm in that pit, all the clerks that are out here, the deck handlers, he goes, everybody pick a number between 1 and 10. It was like 10 of us. Write down a number. Okay? He'd write down a number. He reads his number. He goes, anybody got 3? Some guy can't. I picked 3. Give him a $100 bill. This is 1976. Okay? I'm like, wow. So I said to him, I go, do you do this? He goes, yeah. He handed out money. It was insanity. You know what I mean? So he would do these little things like that, and he kept you in stitches all week long. I can remember one thing. Some guy walked on the trading floor, and Harry goes, that freaking guy looks like a freaking porn star, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, yeah. He goes, I might be a porn. He goes, he might be a porn star. He goes, but he's got nothing on the hat hose. And another thing was, there was this girl named Sue, and her last name was with an S too. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And not to be crude here, she walks by and she's walking by. He leans his head out of the pit. He looks all us. He goes, you hear about Sue? I'm like, no, what? He goes, Sue sucks 6 sacks simultaneously. I'm like, oh, holy shit. I thought I was a little funny. That's what he would do, and everybody be dying. Like I said, it was great getting a start like that and meeting the old gentleman of that day. And, there was another woman trader, Carol Lazarus, I think her name was. She was very nice. And everybody was so nice. And as I was there, I got to be friendly with guys in the hog pit and the cattle pit and their brokers and stuff, and got to know a lot of people. And just had the time of my life. It was the best job pre-being a broker trader I've ever had in my life.
One of your superpowers, you already know this though, is befriending people. You have a knack
thanks.
for making relationships, and
Well, thank you.
yeah, and the fact that you remember all of those people and you have reverence for all those people, that means you had to get intimate with them in conversations. It wasn't just a hi bye. It was there were meaningful conversations and stuff.
Meaningful because they were nice. I remember Joe Fox. Okay, you know, Mark Fox and that whole all the Fox boys.
Was
and John Fox Jr.
Joe their father?
Yeah, Joe was their father.
Okay.
He had a company called Fox Deluxe, but he was also a broker in the pork belly pit. You know, and just big, huge guy. And then they had a brother Joey, who lived at Misericordia. Okay, and Joey was just the greatest kid in the world.
Mm-hmm.
The greatest kid in the world. You know, he had his handicaps and everything, but the nicest kid, and he was one of us.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe Fox was just a nice man. They were all just so nice.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I got to know all their kids later as we all got older. John and Mark and Tim and Tom and everybody else like that. So, but there was just so many. I hope I'm not leaving. That's when I first met Jack Sander when he would trade in that pit.
Talk about a well-dressed guy. Holy cow.
Well-dressed guy, and he didn't mess with Jack, even back in that day.
Yeah.
You know, Leo Malamed, and, you know, and of course, Barry Lynn, who I got to be very good friends with. And I worked there, and then I took a break to move back. My parents moved to New Jersey. And my brother was at the Cotton Exchange. I kind of missed, I had rented an apartment, okay? And then, you know, I was making $300 a week, but I was also still delivering Chinese food and stuff like that. So I was making like $400 or $500 a week. This is 1976. So I rented an apartment somewhere. I think the rent was $150, you know, and this and that and that. And I went and bought a red Mustang for hardly anything. As long as it started in the morning, I was happy with it. And, you know, I was on my own and got taught how to pay bills. Electric bill, you know, your phone bill, your whatever. So, you know, you learned all that. And I, you know, wasn't that great at it, but, you know, and then, but I kind of missed home. And then a few things happened in between where I ended up back in New Jersey.
You left the floor or you were just traveling?
I left the floor. Without getting into it, I had got involved with this girl. And it kind of sidetracked me.
That too. Okay.
It kind of sidetracked me a little bit. Sidetracked where I gave up my job with Harry for a little while to hang with her. And it was just one of those things. And moved back to New Jersey. And I remember my mom had, without getting into the long story of it, because it's too long, but anyway, my mom, I talked to her on the phone. She goes, you know, you're not working at the exchange anymore, and you know, I had given up my apartment and I was living somewhere else because I think it's time to come home. I said, okay, I'll come home. You know, and my dad said, I'll get you a job on the trading floor here. So at the World Trade Center. So my mom and my sister came out, and I had gotten rid of my car. We drove back to New Jersey, and we drove back to New Jersey on August 16th, 1977. We were driving back to New Jersey.
How do you remember that day?
Because that's the day Elvis died.
Wow.
So we're driving back to New Jersey. I'm like, okay, I got all my crap in my car, in her trunk, and you know, and my mom and my sister, and sitting in the back seat, and we're getting close to wherever we were, Pennsylvania, and they were listening to the radio, and it says more on Elvis in a minute. I said, turn it up. Turn it up. They're playing Elvis. And, sure enough, they came on and they said, Elvis Presley, you know, dead at the age of 42. I'm like, silent.
Now, were you a diehard Elvis at that time?
Diehard Elvis fan since I was a little kid. So was my family in Brooklyn, New York. I used to pay $0.25 and go see his movies by myself.
Wow.
That's how much of a diehard fan.
It must have crushed you.
Crushed me. Loved everything Elvis. Wanted to be Elvis. And so I went back to New Jersey. That night, I remember, we finally got home, and my brother Steve gave me a job in the cotton pit where he worked. You know, he was a big cotton trader at this time. Actually, my dad had gotten him a seat in 1972, 73 for his wedding present. You know, and the seats were cheap. And actually, my dad got him it was like $4,000 for a seat on the cotton floor. But you had a $50,000 guarantee, and Gene Cashman put that up for him. You know, the legendary bean trader.
Mm-hmm.
So he started, my brother, he caught on real fast and became real good, and he was a very successful broker at the time. So I went on the trading floor there and worked for them, and worked for, my dad got me a job with Payne Weber. It was a good friend of his. My dad was all working there also. But Payne Weber gave me a runner's job and a phone clerk job and all this other stuff. And after a week there, I'm like, this is like kindergarten compared to, the Merc, And, but I lasted there a while and missed it. Loved being at home and everything else like that. But then I really missed the Merc. So long story short, I lived there maybe 9 months. 10 months. And from the trading floor one day, I called Harry on the trading floor. I remember I had Heinhold Commodities number still to get hold of Harry. Remember, there was no cell phones.
Right. You had to call a desk and they had
I said, Harry, is there any way I could have my job back? He goes, when do you want to start? He goes, I miss you. I said, I don't know. You tell me. He goes, how about next Monday? I said, done. I went home and told my mom, I'm going to move back to Chicago.
Let me ask you a question real quick. Did you work with Harry long enough to get a Christmas bonus?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, before you left.
Oh, yeah.
So do you remember what that was? People in the real world don't understand like the ridiculousness of the trading floor.
I think he gave me $1,000.
$1,000.
$1,000 for Christmas back in 1976. Whatever.
When you're making $300 a week,
yeah,
right?
I mean, but he gave you more than that anyway. Harry would let me clean his house on a Saturday. So, and Harry had this mansion in Evanston. I think it was on Edgemere Court, if I still remember, off of Lee Street there in Evanston, right on the water, right on the very exclusive, with gates. So, I always wanted money, so he let me clean his house. And I walk in his house, he hands me a bottle of Windex and some paper towels. I go, should I wash your windows or something? He goes, no. He goes, do the dining room floor first. I went and I look in these used dining room, and it's a glass mirror floor. I'm like, holy shit. You got a glass mirror dining room floor? So I remember doing all that and cleaning his house, and then he gave me a razor blade. Okay, and I'm like, he goes, when you do my bathroom, he goes, if you could, just get all the scum off the shower doors and shit. He goes, I'm like, seriously? I go, all right, it's Harry. I wouldn't have done it for anybody else, so I cleaned all the scum off of his shower doors and shit. But I'm leaving for the day, and and I remember Derby was out there sitting outside there. Derby's with his, his big grin. Remember Derby's grin?
Oh, yeah.
The
Derby.
Big grin?
Yeah.
He waves to me sitting outside as I'm cleaning the house. I'm like, okay. Kind of looking at me like, yeah, how you doing? So, but anyway, I leave. Harry goes, you need a TV or anything? I got an extra TV. I'm like, yeah. Nice. I put a big brand new color TV in my car. And he goes, here'd you pay for the day? He gives me like $200. I'm like, yeah. Yeah, I mean, he was just incredible that way. But so I spent some time in New Jersey, and I moved back, and I called a friend, and just to get situated, and stayed at their house because my parents had moved, and got back there, and I walked to the train station. It was quite a hike every morning, but I didn't care. I was back. Started with Harry right away, right where we left off. And this was March of 78. Remember it? And so happy to be back, see same old faces. In the meantime, he had gotten another deck handler that was gone, but and now, Dickie was, I think, a gold broker. Maybe T-bills. Because they were flying all over. T-bills and gold were flying all over the place. So I got my job back, and I got bumped up. He gave me $500 a week, and said, okay. And then got another apartment in Deerfield, and right away, back then, I think I got this nice apartment. It was $175 a month. You know, they gave me a deposit. You had your apartment. So it all fell into place real quick again. I was back there, and it was busier. I remember it was much busier. The decks were bigger, you know, things like that. But, you know, I got real good at being the deck handler again and really got into it. And, you know, one day I told Harry, I said, you know, I'd like to maybe have a shot, you know, going in the pit. So him and Barry and, excuse my voice, I'm losing a little bit. They talked about it and said, okay, you know, we're going to figure it out. You deserve a shot. We want you in there.
And for our viewers at home, going in the pit means you're going to trade.
Going in the pit means you are going to get a membership. You're going to get a badge, and you are going to be able to trade and fill orders, and you know, and that's a dream come true.
In 1978, you were how old?
21. Yeah. No, actually 20 at the time. Turned 21 in June of 78. So when I brought it up, I was like so excited to even think about it. You know, I remember calling my dad saying, you know, I might get a membership here. You know, and it's like, great, go for it. Go for it. You know, because I remember just to backtrack, when I was leaving, when I decided to go back to Chicago from New Jersey, I remember telling my dad, I said, listen to me. I said, mark my words. I'm going to go back there, get a seat and make it. You know? He goes, I'm sure you are. He goes, go for it. You know, God bless you. But you're doing the right thing, you know? But so after, you know, whatever it was, I don't know, 6-8 months, we sat down and they just started the idea of leasing a seat. Before you had to buy them. They were much cheaper. So I was one of the first guys to do that, lease a seat. And I think they were like $3,000, lease a CME seat. So we figured out, okay, we'll lease you a CME seat. We'll pay it was $4,000 a month, okay, $1,000 a week, and we'll give you a car. I'm like, yeah. I went home. I'm like, holy, $50,000 a year. I got a seat. So they said, pick out a car. So I picked out, I remember it was a white Buick Regal. Really nice, loaded. They paid the lease on that. And they said, okay. And Harry goes, because I'm going to go and do some stuff in the cattle. And I want to do some other stuff. So you'll work with Jerry, you know, Barry and Jeffrey mostly. So that's what we'll do. So we're going to collect all your brokerage. And I said, okay. He goes, we'll pay you salary. We get all your brokerage. And whatever you make trading, you keep. And I was like, I didn't care about the brokerage. I saw what they were doing trading. And I couldn't wait. So, you know, studied for my test, I guess, in the fall of 79, I think it was. Went in and took my test, I think November. I'm trying to tinge foggy, but I passed it and I had a badge the next day. And like, I got my badge, went, you know, ACE, ACE. I picked ACE and walked in the pit. And, you know, I remember like Kalennis and everybody else is like,
that's kind of cool.
Elvis got his badge because I always sang Elvis songs in the pit. I used to imitate him great.
I've seen you do that before.
I used to sing my Elvis songs and this and that, you know, so entertain everybody a little bit. Everybody's like, congrats, whatever we can do for you. You know, whatever we can do for you, we'll do. And, you know, and I got in there and I remember my first order, I think it was buy one at the market. I think it was Mark Milstein was offering one. I said, buy it, you know, $32.60. I just use that as a price.
Yeah.
3M, and he traded Freeling at the time. I think it was $265 or whatever it was. That's it. Here you go.
And it was fun, right?
Oh, it was the best. It was the best. But from putting that deck together, and just to back up a little bit, you know, back in those days, just like in the future days, you know, you got your close orders, you got your opening orders. You might get 37 to buy at the market, okay, 55 to sell at the market, you knew you were a net seller of 18. Okay. You were a net seller of 18, and that was it. So, I mean, I got to know it all so well and everything else like that. I remember I did the close that day. I think I was a net buyer of, 11 cars, the bell rings, blah, blah, blah. They're offering whatever it is, by 3, by 3, by 4, by 1, blah, 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 whatever. You split it up. And I remember my first day, one of the guys said, "You should have bought them all from me." I'm like, just wanted to split them up, man. Everybody's offering in front of my face. He goes, if you've been watching, I've been long all day, and I've been buying and bidding this market up and everything else like that. And, I said, I'll keep an eye on that. Sorry about that.
And that's legit, too.
Legit. No, legit. Very legit. Back then, they didn't, I don't know if it's right or wrong to say, but if you were a net, just call it a net buyer at 10, you had 30 to buy, 20 to sell. You'd buy your 10, then you just cross the order with the guys. Here, I bought 20 right in the middle of the range, which was better than, once you start out, as you're buying that offer and you're selling that bid. So it could be you're buying up here and you're selling down there. Why not put it together where everybody gets a nice fair price?
Right. Which they made illegal eventually. Right?
They made illegal eventually, but because people also took advantage of it. Let's just face the facts.
Right.
Here, buy 30, sell you 20. You bought 30 at 60 and you sold them their 20 at 40. And, let's just face the facts.
Yeah.
It was what it was. So,
isn't it amazing how where you came from, and this happened to everybody down there, how you lose your perception of money? Because when I was a runner, I was working at McDonald's as a manager, and I was making $90 a week, and I was a manager at McDonald's making $15,000 a year. And the desk manager at Refco, his badge was Wino, Dave Winograd.
Yeah. Winograd.
I go, what is he making? $36,000. I'm like, man, if I could get there, I'll be set for life, right?
Right.
And you get close, and you're looking way beyond that. Your perception of money gets distorted so quick, doesn't it? If you're climbing the ladder,
you're talking to the king of money getting distorted. Okay.
Okay.
I mean, you're talking to the king. I mean, I should teach a class, dumbass 101. How to make millions. Okay, and how to really fuck it up. Yeah. So, talk about money getting distorted. I mean,
okay.
we haven't even
I didn't need it as a dig, but yeah.
No, we haven't even gotten there yet. So, and I started going on. I started trading a little bit, you know what I mean? And making some money trading. My goal was to make a couple $100 trading, which I did, and it was a small knit group. And, all the guys were so nice in the beginning. Here, sell you one, buy one.
The little layups for you.
Yeah, just like they do in every pitch for the new guys. Sell you one at 40, buy one at 60. 20 points in the bellies. I think it was $3.80 a point. You just made $72.
Right.
Whatever, $76. But you have guys doing that. But I started trading and doing okay. And I was like, oh my God. I remember calling my dad saying, this is insanity. This is so great. I talked to my mom, and I was so happy about it all. And so were they. So, and I eventually kind of took the deck over from these guys in there. I had a knack, and not to brag or anything, I had a knack of just knowing when to pull the trigger, knowing what to pull the trigger. A feel. Okay. And I remember an instance. There was a guy named Bill Malik. He ran E.F. Hutton at the time. And he had this order in at whatever the price might be, we'll call it 60, to buy like 30 on a stop. Okay. And I got, stop meaning either you're getting in because it's a chart point, but mostly you're getting out and you're getting stopped out for a loss.
Right.
So I remember it hit 60, but then broke all the way back down. Or somebody inserted a 60 trade in. I traded 60 up there. And then the bellies broke like 80 points, which is huge. So Bill Malik came up. He said, where'd you fill a stop? I said, I didn't fill it. He goes, you didn't fill it? Because I can tell my client you didn't fill that stop, even though it hit there. I said, yeah. I go, I don't want to stop them out. I go, they inserted that. I go, so you know what? He came back, he hugged me. He goes, my client says, thank you beyond words, because the market continued to break from there. He goes, you saved him a fortune. And, so I really appreciated that pat on the back. And that's how I started to fill a lot of my stuff, And a lot of the guys in the pit, like Mark Milstein, God bless his soul, if he had something on it, he didn't want people to know, he'd say, okay, look, buy me 120 bellies, best you can. He didn't want anybody to know he's getting out, because then people race you, they see what you're doing, all that other stuff. And so I created an act for doing that and using my judgment.
You were known as an exceptional counter as well.
Yeah,
So-
you know what? And thank you. I just had a knack for being able to keep my count through the worst of it, through the craziest of markets. I mean, just was always blessed with a good math mind.
Yeah.
It's shitty in school with everything else, but math I was always good.
So for you guys at home, when you're a broker and you're filling orders is what we say, but you're basically buying and selling for your customers, your clerks are yelling at you, buy 500, sell 750, make my 750, 687 only. You're buying, you're selling, and your brain is acting like an abacus. Like you have to keep your count in your head. You can't write it down and wait. You got to execute. And, Jimmy was the biggest broker on the floor at one time, and you have to have like a crazy fast processing mind, and you had a reputation for that.
Yeah, well, thank you. And you know what? And I prided myself on it. And, as you lose your count.
We all get beyond our human capacity as a broker, right?
But you lose your count, and that could be it.
Yeah.
I mean, it could cost you a fortune. But especially when you had the paper, the trading cards were much easier. But as you went further, into the euros and everything else, and when everything was on your trading cards, when it was on that paper sometimes could be so cumbersome, but all of a sudden, when it's a fast market, you got to know what you got in there. And I used to just write down, okay, in between 60 and 80, in case it's fast market, I have, 84 cars to sell in between that. In case it goes, half bid, 60 bid, 70 bid, 80, bam, sell you 80.
Right.
And everybody got the 60s and 70s, whatever, got their fills a little better, but you kept your counts every certain increment that you chose to where that is like when, as the orders got bigger in the euro dollars, you could have thousands, and in the S&Ps especially, I remember when I had like a Morgan Stanley deck in there when I first started in there, they'd buy 10 every tick, and back then the ticks were 10-point ticks before they changed it to 25 or whatever it was. And but you'd have your scales and you keep your count because you never know what the opening might be. But I worked real hard at that, and of course we all had our times where we took our hits, but it just. It was just such a crazy, great time. And I was flying high. Could have never imagined. You know what I mean? I had my nice Buick Regal. I had my nice apartment. I had everything. I'm trading. So in my apartment complex, I had the one bedroom, a really nice, bigger one opened up, and I told I'll take it because I knew the manager. The manager of that was the brother of kids I went to high school with. And Deerfield was a tight-knit town. And he goes, you got it. So I got this apartment. It was great. I had a nice kitchen, living room, dining room, a nice big bedroom, all this stuff. And I'm making money. And it was even though it was an apartment, I went uptown to Deerfield and went to the interior decorator store. I go, yeah, I want to wallpaper my apartment. He goes, it's an apartment. I don't care. So I had them come in and put up all this nice fancy wallpaper, all this crazy stuff, because I love the apartment. Went out and got some furniture from Sears, nice sectional glass table, yeah, the whole thing. Went to a phone store and bought these beautiful phones, box phones. I had the whole thing going in that apartment, and that was mine and my friends hangout.
In the timeline from you first walked on the floor to a runner to now you're a broker and you're trading, was it like 3 years?
Yeah, it was 79. It was at the end of 79. When I had all that going on. And just to back up, I did make an extra few bucks here or there, and then maybe I should admit this or whatever. But, when you were the deck handler, right before I got me, when you were the deck handler, you had your certain locals that say, what are you guys doing in the close? Da, 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 da. Da, 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 da. There was a couple of guys, I won't name their names, but, they were always like, what are you doing in the close? So they knew if we were buying 82 in the close. So blah, 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 blah. What do you have here? So, okay, I'm buying a bunch. You know what I mean? And if I'm buying a bunch, pretty much the other paper's buying whatever it was. So these guys would go in there, get long a little bit maybe, and then offer them, right to the brokers that I would hand the stuff to. And they do okay. And one guy bought me a VCR. One guy, I'm walking out there on a Friday, he hands me $500 cash. I maybe shouldn't even be saying this, but, it had its advantages.
Yeah, sometimes. I understand.
And you're a kid, and you ain't turning that down, okay? So, but, yeah, so at 79, I had my nice new apartment. It was great. And flying pretty good. And then I had my Buick Regal. And then I saw somebody's driving their 450 SL Mercedes. Like, that's a nice freaking car, man.
Is that the 2-seater?
Yeah, the 2-seater.
What a gorgeous car.
So I go see, if you ever get one, go see my guy up at Auto House, in Northbrook, wherever it was. I go, how much is that? He goes, so you can lease one, whatever. One day I just drove up there. I met this guy. And he goes, yeah, Mark told me you were coming up. You might stop in. Because I told Mark Palmer was his name, I think it was. I said, tell your buddy up there I might come and see him. Forgot the guy's name, the salesman, but I'm up there looking around. He goes, isn't this silver one a beauty? It was like a blue silver. He goes, you want to drive it out of here? I'm like, seriously? Yeah, at least here, I'll let you have it. I'll let you take it today. He goes, I go, how much is this? He goes, whatever the lease was. Wasn't much. I said, all right. So I go, how much is it to buy? I don't know if I want to lease it. He goes, to buy, I think it was 40 grand, whatever it might have been.
Which was a shit ton back then.
Yeah, and he goes, but I can finance it for you. I said, all right, let's do that. I said, so how much down? He goes, a couple of grand. He did all the paperwork. He goes, okay, you're approved. Because back then the traders and everybody, they were the gods and kings, as you know, to these car dealers on the North Shore especially, and everywhere else. And as we got bigger and bigger, and the exchange got bigger and bigger, I mean, we were the kings of the city, no matter where you went. Nobody spent more, tipped more, or anything like that. So you walked into one of these places back in those heydays. Oh, you're a trader? Come here. I just figured we all made fortunes. So anyway, I said, when can I pick this up? He goes, tomorrow. I said, all right. So this is a funny story. So I go pick up the car. I get a ride up there. And I have a brand new 450 SL blue, shiny blue, light blue gray convertible. I'm like, this is insanity. I have this car. So about the first weekend, whatever it was, in my apartment complex, okay? And I didn't know it really at the time, but when you pulled into my apartment complex, there was a row of ranch houses that were there. And then you pulled into my complex. Well, Jimmy Kalenis' sister lived there, okay? So I'm pulling up and I'm pulling around, And there's Jimmy Clennis, Dean Clennis leaning against cars like that. You know, they had their Mercedes. I think Jimmy had a green 450 SL. Dean had whatever, and they're all leaning out there. And I got my top down, and even though it's cold out, they're leaning out there, and Clennis sees him. He's like, I'm like, so I told him, I said, listen to me. He goes, that didn't take long.
Wow.
I go, do me a favor. Don't tell anybody. I don't want anybody to know I got this car. Blah, blah, blah. He's like, yeah, okay. You know? I'm like, shit. But anyway, I had the car now, and I got in the trading for that day, and I walk in there, and Clennis is just like leaning up against the thing with his hand on his cheek. Goes, oh, and I like your gold chain, too.
Busted your stones.
He goes, new car, gold chain. Ooh, he goes, ooh, new cowboy boots. I'm like, yeah. He goes, boy, you learn fast. And so, but, you know, those were just classic great times. But the greatest thing with the car is I met my first wife, Mary. And we went on a date to Victoria Station in Northbrook. And everything was, I had my seat, everything was going great, making money, doing very well trading, actually. And I had no fear of trading, and the worst thing you can do is be successful in the beginning with kind of no fear, trading, going along with the Mark Milstein or this guy, following what they're doing, you know, because they're so good at it. And all of a sudden, you know, you hit a run, and all of a sudden you made a couple of $100,000 in this run, okay? And it's like a false security. No, you're not that good at it. You've been lucky, but in your mind you're saying, oh,
I'm infallible.
Because we'll get to a point in the bellies when that taught me a giant lesson. But anyway, so I have this car now, and I picked Mary up for my first date with her. I had met her at a place, long story, and then we walked out of Victoria Station, and I saw a 450 SL there. I'm like, a nice car, even though I have one. She doesn't know it yet. I go, that's a nice car. She's like, yeah, it's like my favorite car. And I have fallen in love spot on. I mean, sight, I'm in love, okay? Younger, innocent, nice. You know, I was out there running around pretty good. You know what I mean? I needed to settle down. Remember, I went to her house not long after that, and not too long, maybe the next week, and I pulled up. She got off work at the dentist office, and I pulled up my mother's there, and I pulled up my blue Mercedes, whatever. They're like, God, whose car is that? I go, mine. She's like, that's your car? I said, yeah. So, you know, I was like, this is the greatest feeling in the world. You can't beat this feeling. The greatest feeling in the world.
In your entire life, if you take like those moments where you felt as good as you could feel, that's one of them right there.
No, my first half of my career is my favorite part of my career. It was all new. I was young. It was exciting. It wasn't complicated. I wasn't into nightclubs or investing in this or doing any of that crap that came later, which we'll get into later. But this was just simple. I went and traded and came home, and you know, at the same time that I bought a new townhouse up in Highland Park, a place called Chantilly. It was $100,000. Beautiful, 2-story, 2-bedroom, had a pool out there. Went and bought that too. Now I had this new townhouse, and you know, and I bought that as soon as I started dating Mary, and I think she was kind of like, wow. And I think her parents were too. You know, her parents, Jack and Carmen, God bless Jack's soul. He was in New York. They were New Yorkers too, and he was, you know, Jack Fay. He was the dad. He was wondering, where the hell is he getting this money? I told him I'm a commodity broker. He said, what's that?
Is he father of the Fahey's who came in the pit?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, all
I
the
understand.
Fahey's. Yeah, so and Mary was their sister. Jack Fahey was your typical, you know, New Yorker, tough guy, Irishman. He goes, what's a mercantile exchange? You know, what the fuck is that? They thought I was dealing drugs and all sorts of shit. And you know, remember John and Mike and everything? They're like, wow.
Did you bring them in?
Yeah. Yep. Brought them in later, you know, including my brother Chuck and, you know, a few other people down the road. Yeah. But In the beginning, those were the best times in my life.
Mm-hmm.
It was new. You know, the world wasn't crazy.
It was almost like you were cheating life. Didn't you feel like, what? This is crazy.
I used to look in the mirror and pinch myself. I said, are you kidding me? And I appreciated it and loved it. You know, it wasn't like I thought it was Billy Big shit. I considered myself the luckiest guy in the world. All of a sudden, this came to fruition. You know, now I met the girl of my dreams. And now I have this, my townhouse, my Mercedes. I'm like, shit. And man, those, you know, then I forgot what I had put on my plate, you know, Ace PB, whatever, special plate, you know, and got, you know, to be great friends with a lot of the guys like the Barry Lyns, got to be friends with Jim Calentis and other guys outside the group. You know, Harry was always the greatest. And, you know, we would laugh a ton and Harry would say, yeah, isn't it effing great? Yeah, I saw your car. Isn't it awesome?
And for clarity, you think you're king of the world. These guys, they're light years above you in terms of money and wealth and all that stuff.
In terms of everything you can imagine. I'm still a kid. I'm a 22-year-old kid living life, and I'm driving my Benz, and I have my Elvis Aviator sunglasses on, my top down, man, and my collar up. Now I'm buying the shirts with the collars. I'm like, you know, and you're driving this shit around, and my townhouse, I got it all, and you know, it was crazy. I think the bellies, you know, it taught me everything, and the relationships. And unfortunately, so many of them are gone. You know what I mean? I mean, you know, some of them are still around, but much older now. I mean, I'm 66. You know, the Barry Lyns, the Mark Milsteins, the Ted Coles. Well, I just loved them all, and they were so great. Actually, great story about Ted Cole. When I was getting married to Mary, in 81, I got married to her. Ted had a Rolls Royce, you know, and Ted was such a nice man. And he offered it to me for my wedding. I didn't even invite him to the wedding, only because the guy Barry Hirschroy, who we worked with, you know, was telling me who I shouldn't and shouldn't invite to the wedding. You know, one of those things. I want to invite Kalennis. I want to invite this guy. They said no, you know, because they're competitors, and I'll get into some funny stories on what happened. But Ted gave me his Rolls, so I used the Rolls Royce to leave the church with champagne in it, with you know, after the wedding ceremony and everything. You know, Ted gave me that. And, you know, I'll never, ever forget that and his generosity. So, you know, thank you, Ted, and God bless you. And God bless your sons, Scott and Steve. A super great family, these guys.
Awesome.
No, awesome.
Do you remember how much money roughly we're making when you got married? Just
couple of $100,000 at least.
A year?
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. I was building it up pretty good. I remember, let's see, Mary, I met her in April, and we got engaged that fall. I knew her 6 months. Then I am marrying her, blah, 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 blah. And I remember me and Mary went and got a Bailey Banks and Biddle in Northbrook Court. They had this great jewelry store. And I ended up being what they called my candy store. I mean, you know, all Highline stuff.
Yeah, Billy Banks and Biddle. That was
it was all Highline and all.
That's like Tiffany.
Yeah, crystal and you name it, jewelry. So I went and got her a, you know, nice and $10,000 engagement ring. I asked her to marry me, and I remember said, "Don't tell anybody." I said, "Don't tell anybody. You know, I want to tell them. I, you know, haven't asked her dad yet or anything like that." But we decided that's what we're going to do. So she called me. I was at my townhouse. She was at home. She goes, "I told my parents." I think that's what the hell it went. She called me. I'm like, "What?" You know, so I had to go over there. and we're talking. And he goes, "You getting engaged?" And, you know, Jack Fahey, "I don't even know what you do." And I don't even know what you do. And Carmen's like, you know, they're all kind of nervous. And Mary's sitting there and kind of all nervous. And I'm like, I said, "I'm a commodity trader." And he goes, "You know, yeah, we don't even know you. We've known you 6 months, and you know, this is craziness." And I said, "Let's go talk. Let's go sit down, okay?" So we sit down, just me and him in the living room. I go, look, I'm a trader. It's the Mercantile Exchange. I go in the pit and I made it as simple as I could. Okay. And I said, I buy and I sell. I buy low, sell high in these markets down here. It's just like the stock market. And I go, plus I fill customer orders and I make a living off of that. So I get paid from both ends. And I happen to be good at it at a young age. I caught a break. And I happen to be doing very well. He goes, what's very well? I said, a couple of $100,000 a year. He goes, you make that much money? I said, yeah. And I go, look, my brother's a broker. He does it too, and all this other stuff. He goes, I thought you were dealing drugs or something, and blah, blah, blah. All this crazy. I never heard of the exchanges, and, and I'm over at Allstate making this, and blah, 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 blah. I said, yeah. I go, so, look, I'm going to take care of Mary. I love her, and I said, this is all legit and everything. Looks at me, and he goes, I don't even know how I'm going to pay for a wedding. I said, we'll worry about that. I said, we'll worry about that. I go, you know what? We'll figure something out. He goes, oh, yeah? Gets up. Walks in. Carmen, get the champagne.
He's ready to hang you at first. And then...
Carmen, get the champagne.
Classic.
So we all celebrated. That was that. And we picked for the following April. I knew her. I was married to her within a year or so. I known her so. But that was great. And I love the boys and the family. They're all younger. And, we had a blast. So these are great times. Mm-hmm. We remember these. I mean, it was innocent, great, great times that, that was my favorite part of my life. You know what I mean? Those, all that stuff. But, continued to go in the bellies and, continued to do better. And then like we were talking about, and it was going great. Okay. And then I was just on a real nice roll, making money trading and, filling. And now my salary, I was the main filler in there for them and filling a crap load of business. And so they're paying me more now. Now they're paying me $8,000 a month plus a seat lease, whatever. Plus I keep my trading, and it was going fantastic. And until I was following one of the guys, and he said, "I think we're going to be." They had these things called pick crop reports, and when the pick crop report came out, the bellies either went limit down or limit up and locked. I think it was 200 points. Maybe 150 for the bellies or 200 points. You go limit down, everybody in the world's trying to sell it, you're locked at the limit. And chances are the next day it's going to open the limit down again. It all depended on, how these reports came out. That was the risk of that. And I got caught in one of those because I figured it was going up and it ended up costing me $200,000.
Wow.
And
huge hit.
And a huge hit almost wiped out my entire bank account, but I had everything at the time, but didn't faze me too bad. I'm going to work this back. Luckily at the time, at first I forgot who I was clearing whoever they had me clearing. Then I was clearing a firm called K&S. It was a guy named Maury Crumhorn and a guy named Ronnie Schiller. Ronnie was a great guy, big trader in the big cattle broker. He had a huge deck in there. And Maury Crumhorn was a big trader. So they created a clearinghouse, K&S. So I also cleared trades through there. So this was in theirs. And they said, don't worry about it. They were so great. It was like, okay, don't worry about it. You get it back. So they let me trade it back. A lot of it. I wrote a check for some of it, let me trade it back. And then I started clearing, did that. And then I was also clearing Lynn Waldock. And, and speaking of Lynn Waldock, Barry Lind, when I saw his house, he had the first Merc house. Barry Lind, he owned Lynn Waldock, and on Locust Road in Winnetka, 80 Locust Road, when I first saw his house, it was like the Beverly Hillbillies house. It was like 12,000 square feet. It was incredible. And Barry had a football field built with goalposts and, the yards and refs, and they would have football games there.
Holy crap.
On Sundays. So he invited me to play. And I don't know if you remember, there was a guy who played for the Bears way back. His name was Tom Hicks. And Tom Hicks had become a trader and a broker there. Tom played. So we'd go to Barry's on Sunday mornings, and he'd have refs, and we'd play a legit football game. You know what I mean? I remember I had a pretty good arm in my day, and so I was our quarterback, and I'd get my team. It was, I think John Fahey played. I think Bill Holway, God rest his soul, played. It was a bunch of us, and we'd take on Barry Lynn and his team, you know? And the only time I think I ever lost was when Kalenis was their quarterback, because he could throw a freaking football. He didn't move much, but for some reason they beat us. But Barry then would have us all in this, monstrous home in his kitchen for a buffet, eggs and everything made after that, and then Barry would have me over for Thanksgiving, and he'd have the whole world over on Thanksgiving. And that's how I met a ton of other great people like Steve and Shelley Zucker. Steve Zucker was Jim McMahon's agent. And part of all the Barry had stepbrothers, and he had just a giant family that I got to know. Herb Young, Alan Young, that's what they created, Young Trading.
Mm-hmm.
There was Alan, his son, who was also in the cattle. So got to meet and be friends with all these people too, a completely different group, older group outside of, the people I was hanging with from the bellies and stuff. So it was just a magical, cool, great time. And, and just kept on going along in the bellies and until about, and doing that, made my money back. And then Mark Milstein told me, he was going to move, and he had a beautiful home in Northbrook. And he goes, I'm selling my house. So I went and looked at his house, and it was this beautiful, maybe 4,000 square foot, whatever, in a cul-de-sac in Northbrook with swimming pool, all this great stuff.
And you still had the townhome at that time?
I still had the townhouse. I said, how much? He said, $300,000. He goes, no realtor, that I'll take it. So we shook hands. I go, I want to buy this. So I got married, and I showed her the house. I'm like, got to have this. So I gave Mark a check for 30. He goes, I gave him a check for $30,000 as a down payment until, he got everything. He had some time because he was building a house in Highland Park along with his neighbor, Vic Pro. The pros, Vic, I don't know if Vic had, he had a whole family, Johnny and Jeff Pro, and I don't know if you remember Court Lewis.
Mm-mm.
He married their daughter, Julie. So this is, See, all this is before like guys like your time. But I love Vic Pro. God rest his soul too. But anyway, went and checked out the house. Mary's like, this is gorgeous. So I bought it. Mark goes, well, you can't move into list because I'm building my house here. I said, whatever. I'm good. So I sold my townhouse at a nice profit and moved into that house. And got an interior decorator and did the whole thing. And now it was great, And at that time, a small mortgage, I think I might have put down another $70,000. So I had a $200,000 mortgage on this gorgeous house. So that was great. But that was just a magic time. I know I'm going in and out of stories here, but so many of them start coming back to me. You know what I mean? And, I kept going along until I wasn't too happy in the bellies anymore. Wasn't really getting along with one of the guys in there that I was working with. And he would have me fill orders, take other people's orders that weren't theirs. And I remember he would try to sneak me these E.F. Hutton orders. A lot of the people like Jim Kalenis had E.F. Hutton, and he might have had half a Lehman, half of E.F. Hutton. We might have had the other half. He had the buy side, we had the sell side. The guy I worked with, had something going out, the desk manager, let's say at Hutton. So he'd sneak us in orders. That was supposed to be Jimmy Kalenis.
Oh, I got you.
I don't like doing that whatsoever. I didn't like that at all. And actually, they were my bosses still, So I was doing what I was told, and I remember Jim found out about it, wasn't real happy about it, to say the least. You know, when he pulled me to the side, he said, you know, he goes, "You keep doing this." He goes, "This isn't going to end well." I said, "I think I got it." And it wasn't quite that what he said, but I won't go into that. But I told Barry, I don't want to do this anymore. Then he would have fits, and then I was a much better broker than this guy, and so he didn't like that. Anyway, and then the S&Ps was starting to take off. And Louis Borsellino, who I had met, Louis, he was in the S&Ps now, and you know, and they had the small little pit in the back of the Merc.
The S&P was a small pit?
Oh, small little pit in the back of this, the Merc still. They built a little thing, and you walk in there, maybe a little bigger than this room.
Wow.
But Lewis was in there and everything else, and the S&Ps were flying around a little bit, and you know, so I took notice of that, and you know, then we moved buildings. We moved over to where we were most recently at,
South Wacker, yeah.
You know, they had 2 trading floors, one up, one down, and so you know, there was the giant floor on the S&P pit was big, so you know, we got to the new trading floor and everything like that, and the S&Ps just took off. And you know, and the euros were going, you know, and everything was going, you know, and a couple of my friends who I had brought down to the Merc, a guy named Larry DeAngelis, and his badge was Max, and a few other guys, Mike Smith, Perry Smith, they all branched out into like currency pits because they were up and coming. Now they were busy, you know, and building businesses in there. They were getting busier, and with the S&Ps was really flying around, and you're starting to hear some great stories out of it. These guys making a fortune, you know, and I went over there one day and I was just looking at it. And, saw a few guys I knew, you know, and Lewis was one of them, and Joey, you know, who I had met, Joey Borsellino, and that crew, you know, the beginning of that crew. And Lewis said, "You got to get in here. You got to get in here. A ton of business in here. We had and everything else, but the trading's great." So long story short, one day I just said, "I've had it here in the bellies." The bellies got too, I don't know. You know, they just had so many people that got mad at me. I was the young buck, and they kind of resented a little bit of that. And I probably got a little more arrogant as I went along, you know, and things like that. But you know, I got to be friends with a lot of guys in there. You know, I forgot to mention Alan Freeman, God bless his soul. He ran Rosenthal, a whole bunch of them. But I had it. I couldn't work under the conditions I was working at and what I was being told to do. So one day I just dropped it and said, "Here's your deck." I was sitting decently with money and everything else, and I decided to give this S&Ps a shot.